We're going to be hearing from the superintendent search firm, and our presentation interview is from John Silveri, almost there, from the Michigan Leadership Institute. Thank you, John.
My pleasure.
Silveri.
First and foremost, thanks for inviting me to be here on behalf of the Michigan Leadership Institute. We really appreciate the opportunity to present to you tonight. So I know that you received from us a written proposal as well, which will include a lot of the details that it's important for you to know. I'm going to obviously not get into quite that much detail in the presentation just due to time, but just know that there are additional details there at your disposal as well. So a little bit about me. I'm a longtime educator, former teacher, counselor, assistant superintendent, HR director, principal. I was superintendent of the Marysville Public Schools in St. Clair County. It's next to Port Huron, if you're not familiar. And then I was also superintendent in a place that you are familiar with, Waterford. Retired from there in 2015 and have been working with the Michigan Leadership Institute ever since, doing a wide variety of things, but first and foremost, the thing that we're best known for and kind of made our mark with is superintendent searches. And in this time, I've done at least 30 of them. I'm going to say in the ballpark of 30 to 35, all throughout Southeast Michigan. So, pleasure to be here, and I'm going to start out jumping right into, because this is a really important thing for you to know, what a sample timeline might look like for you that will include the components of a search as well. So I'll go through all of this, and before I move on, I'll give you the chance to ask any questions on this part that you might have. So roughly we're looking at a 3 to 3.5 month process. Know that we would have the opportunity to talk about this, and it wouldn't necessarily need to look exactly like this, but this is a good ballpark in terms of the timing of it. So the very first thing we would need to do is schedule a meeting where we would all get together, the 7 of you and me, to talk about the parameters of the search. We'd go over it in great detail. Most critically, I would come with a draft timeline, and we would go through that kind of painstakingly and making sure to coordinate calendars and set dates that everybody can live with, where we're all available and in a way we can make work. And obviously, we want to be as efficient with that as possible, too, and get to the finish line as soon as possible, while doing a very thorough search and not kind of skimping on the process. We certainly want to do it with fidelity. We would do so. That's the very first step. So once we do that, we would take a couple of weeks to meet, typically with designated stakeholder groups, and that can mean, quite often it means staff members, parents, community members, high school students. It can be community leaders. I would take my cue from you on that in terms of the groups that you would like me to work with. So those would be face-to-face meetings, and we would put an online survey out if you desired, where we'd ask the same types of things. We're looking to get feedback on the characteristics that you're looking for in your next superintendent, as well as some things about the district that that really stand out that we can include for recruitment purposes in the posting. So we would create from that a candidate profile and a bit of a district and community profile as well, which would be part of a comprehensive position announcement that we would put together during this time too, partially based on that feedback. Once that's all together, I would get that to you so that you could review it, give me any feedback that you have, any tweaks that we may need to make before we go public with that. So about 3 weeks into the process, we'd be ready to post. Once we do that, typically we have the posting out for about a 5-week period. We can talk about that at the first meeting, and if we needed to do something a little bit different, we certainly could do so. I wouldn't want to go a ton shorter than that, but we could talk about that if it would meet your needs to shorten up on that a little bit. But during that time, we post a position on numerous professional sites throughout the state of Michigan. We can do so nationally too. There's an additional fee for the national searches only to cover the actual cost of doing the national search as well. Again, that's something we would talk about at that initial meeting. You wouldn't need to make a decision prior to that. But throughout the state, it goes everywhere. Anybody who aspires to be a superintendent in the state of Michigan will see this posting, and they will know exactly where to look. I would say, frankly, too, if you're an out-of-state candidate and you are desiring to come to Michigan and looking for a superintendency, you know which state sites to go to find these types of postings, too. So this will get out there far and wide. We would be accepting applications until 4:00 p.m. on the agreed-upon final date. During this time, it's a quiet time for you. I'm not sharing applications with you due to confidentiality reasons, but I would be reviewing the applicants, making contacts with many of the applicants, asking questions, doing some screening. We can't do formal reference checks yet because typically they will ask that their applications stay confidential. But informally, we do anything from internet searches, simple internet searches, to this is where the networking that we have at our disposal really comes in handy too. Chances are we're going to probably know many of the people who apply. Chances are they may have been involved in other searches and we've already vetted them. But through our professional contacts, through one way or another, we'll very likely have an opportunity to learn some things about those folks before we share the applications with you. So once that's done, we would schedule a meeting where I would present those applicants to you. We share all of the applications with you. We do group them for you just for efficiency. So we go into closed session, again, because they've asked that the applications be confidential. And per the Open Meetings Act, that's one of the exceptions where you can go into closed session. So I would share all of the applications with you. I would put them into 3 groupings for efficiency and to try to make that portion of this a little bit easier for you. The top portion being those folks who most closely match your candidate profile and who have the most relevant experience. A middle group where these certainly would be qualified people too, who you may want to consider, maybe not quite as much experience as the other folks in the first group, but certainly worth giving some consideration to. The third group, which they would still be folks that you could tap if you were interested, but those would be the individuals who, in my estimation, either wouldn't meet the basic qualifications or there's a red flag or something about them that might want to have you focus on those first 2 groups. Just to be helpful, but know that it's going to be totally up to you folks to pick any of those candidates that you would like to advance. So information only in closed session, come back into open session. That's when you're going to identify which of those candidates you'd like to interview. Typically in the first round it's 4 to 6, but I don't tell you that there's a minimum or a maximum. It's just a little bit uncanny, having done, again, dozens of these searches, that virtually always it ends up being 4 to 6. Right? But if you only find 3 that you're interested in, for example, that's who you can invite. If there are 7 that you really have a keen interest in, we would make that work. It's whatever you really need. The most important thing is that you identify the folks that you believe could be viable candidates and that you'd really like to get to know a little bit better to see if you might want to advance them further. So, and then during that time, I would start the formal reference checks. Now I'm able to do that because those candidates no longer have confidentiality. Their names are public. So that's when I can start to do the formal reference checks, which would include references that they provide, but it would include others too. We never limit it just to the names that they give us. So during this time period too, following that meeting, typically the next week, we would go through and start the first round interviews. We normally do 2 per night. Our interviews are pretty intensive as compared to some of the other firms. First round can be up to 90 minutes each. So if you do 2 of those per night, you're already over 3 hours, and it can be a little bit taxing if you try to stretch it further, but I would take my cues from you. Typically, we would do 2. So if you have 6 candidates, for example, 3 nights of interviews, 2 on each night, we recommend that you then come back for another night to make the decision as to who you want to advance, to take the time to step away, reflect, review the materials again if you need to, and really give some thought to, now that we've gotten to know these candidates better, who is it that we'd like to advance. Part of the reason too is that we're also giving audience members the opportunity to provide feedback. And so they would be able to respond by forums, or if you're streaming the meeting and wanted to give people who are watching that way the opportunity, we could provide a link where they could give feedback that way too. And so one of the reasons we think it's advisable to step away is that you have ample opportunity then to look at all of the feedback that you've received on the candidates as well. So typically, again, when you're talking about finalists, you're going to narrow the field down to 2 to 3. We're going to hope that you can get it down to 2. That's ideal, but we do find sometimes that the board is having a tough time differentiating between 3 candidates, and which is fine, that we would bring them all back. And then the following week, we would get into finalist interviews. Those interviews typically are up to 80 minutes. That would include a presentation of generally about 20 minutes, and then a second interview that would be about 60, roughly. So each finalist would do a presentation and then go through a second interview. During the course of the day, we separate those, so you wouldn't have the finalists come on the same night. Each of the finalists, though, spends the day in the district, and we would provide the opportunity for your stakeholder groups, the same types of groups that would have provided feedback up front, to come in and meet with each of the finalists and interact, ask questions, and then provide you with additional written feedback based on that experience that you can consider before you make your final decision. So yet another opportunity to get your stakeholders involved in the process, which we value, and I believe that you do too. So then we get into weeks 12 to 14, where we're finalizing this, and we normally talk about one of two options that are available to you as an additional step, one being a site visit, where a subcommittee of the board, no more than 3, would go to the work sites of each of the finalists. They have the opportunity to interact with stakeholder groups there and ask questions and kind of get a sense of these folks in a way that you can't just from a simple interview. Many of the boards that I've worked with who have done that, I like to ask for feedback because I want to know if there's value there. And typically, they have said that there's great value and that it can be very enlightening. I've had boards tell me before that was absolutely the difference maker in the process for them. So that would be one option. Another option would be, which might be a little bit tricky given the timing of this, given that we're going to be into the summer, but we can give the option too of having the finalists come into the district, have some of you folks take them on a tour, take them through the district, give them a chance to interact with some of your staff members, and do kind of an evening meet and greet too, where you invite community members and they would have a chance to interact, and you would have a chance to get feedback from that as well. So again, that's one of those things that we would talk about as we were into the process, and you can make a decision then. Finally, you're going to make a selection between those finalists. You come to a meeting, and I would lead you through a process that would, I think, is relatively painless. It's a huge decision, but the process lends itself to a collaborative decision that typically reflects the will of the board. And all that's left to do at that point, so you're going to formally select the person that you'd like to be your next superintendent. All that's left to do at that point is to negotiate terms of the contract. Once you have that worked out, you would then formally, and it could be at a regularly scheduled meeting or a special meeting, you would take action to officially appoint the new leader. So again, from start to finish, you're looking at roughly 14 weeks. But again, at the start, that's one of those things at our very first meeting that we would work out and modify that timeline in the way that we need to. So before I go any further with this, I'm guessing you might have questions about process and timing.
I have a question. So in your proposal, you gave fees in addition. So let's just say you go through the process, and I don't know what week it is. We look at the application, and then we want to, right? This is a very important role. We want to go back into the pool. Is that covered, in your scope? If what you provide us and what we end up interviewing is not what we're looking for, not matches our profile candidate, we want to go back in the pool and take time and find the right person?
I would not only say go back into the pool, whatever we would need to do. If it meant reposting, if it meant additional recruitment, whatever it might mean, we're not done until the job is completed. So we wouldn't be coming back to you, in other words, and I think that's what you're getting at, and saying, okay, here's the additional fee that we would charge for that. The fee is what it is, and the fee covers the process that ends with you selecting your next superintendent. So until that happens, we're not finished, and that fee covers whatever we would need to do.
And then my second question is from an innovative point, like what's innovative that differentiate you from other firms in terms of getting, we've been through, at least I was as a board member, been through the previous process in terms of there's a database, but what innovative things does your firm do that distinguish yourself that everyone else will say they're going to do to get the best candidates?
That's a great question. So I'm going to ask you to hang in there for a minute, because that's a big piece of this presentation, is to talk about what may differentiate us from others. Okay. So I'm going to get to that. Part of the thing I would want to tell you, though, before I get into that, is I think that's actually a really critical point, Because when you look at the basics of a search process, you're not going to find huge differences between any of the firms, I don't believe. Fundamentally, we're all doing similar things in terms of getting you from beginning to end through a search, right? So, so let me move on to that. The one additional thing, well, let me go back to this. Speaking of the fee, we want to be upfront with this too. You see it in front of you in our proposal, but to be public about it, $8,200, which covers all parts of the search. Again, the only additional fees would be if you choose to go national with the posting, and one other piece that I'm going to get to momentarily. But those are both choices that you would make when we get to that first meeting. And again, that covers everything associated with the search. Any expenses that we may bill, there's a cap to that. It may be some basic printing costs during the course of this, but fundamentally that's going to be mileage. And typically when we set that, generally it comes in pretty well under that. For me, when it comes to mileage, I'm not driving too far. I live in Rochester. I'm in Oakland County, so I'm pretty close to you folks, and that doesn't become a big issue. Here's our guarantee, which partially gets to the question that was asked too. If we endorse the candidacy of the selected candidate, and you hire this person, and then he or she chooses to leave the district within the first year of employment, if it's anything other than that person's health or the health of an immediate family member, I would come back and we would go through another search process at no additional fee. So that previous fee would still cover that additional search. The only thing additional we would charge would be any additional expenses, which again basically is going to be mileage and perhaps some simple copying.
Question, and I don't want to lose sight of the last time we did this. Who would be assigned to us?
That would be me.
You.
I would be
Okay.
the person assigned, yeah.
Okay.
We think it's important when we do these presentations, whenever possible, that the person you're interacting with is the person you're going to spend time with. So you want to have a certain comfort level, I'm quite sure, and that's part of your decision making. It would be me. And I'll get to this again a little bit later in the presentation, but before I forget, know though too that I have the resources of the entire organization, and it's very much a collaborative process. So everybody in the organization, we assist one another with these searches. Everybody within the organization, the Michigan Leadership Institute is comprised all of former superintendents, all of us. So we all have that level of experience. It's spread throughout the state.
I'm sorry,
That's
but
okay.
I just remember from the last. So in terms of your bandwidth, right, you're assigned to us.
Yeah.
We thought that, whatever, our timeline is, it's going to be in that. What other projects do you have working on? How much of your time is going to be dedicated to this search?
So here's what when we agree to the timeline and we put those dates on the calendar, I immediately put those dates in my calendar, and those become non-negotiable. Those aren't up for, so in other words, once I have those dates for you in my calendar, if another district comes and wants me to assist with a search or with strategic planning, or whatever the case might be, those simply become unavailable dates to everybody else. They're yours, and I'm committed to those.
Okay.
So I would not budge on those at all.
Okay.
Okay. Then the last extra, if you chose to go this route, is through Hewlings and Associates. It's basically a kind of a personality inventory that we could do that would give you some additional info that might help you determine fit. Now, I will tell you, this is a relatively new service that we provide, and to be totally transparent, I have yet to have a board opt for this and have this be part of a search, so I cannot tell you firsthand how much you might benefit from this or how valuable it would be. I will tell you the organization has experience with it. The organization feels that it is of great value, but it would be totally up to you folks. And again, this is something we would talk about in greater depth when we had that first planning meeting. We would talk about it in greater detail, and you can make a decision at that time. Do you want to add this to the search, or would you rather pass on it? Just know that that's going to be available to you.
I was going to ask a question about this, because as I
Sure.
read through, and correct me if I'm wrong, but as you craft a candidate profile, as we work collaboratively to craft a candidate profile, but then also we've got enough information about a candidate, I guess we don't have to talk about it now, but I would assume that the fit would already, you wouldn't recommend a candidate that doesn't have the attributes of a profile we're looking for, and you wouldn't suggest a candidate that wouldn't fit based on who they are within our district and what our needs are. So,
I would agree with that, and yet the intent here is that this is going to share some insights into the candidates that might not be there on the surface for all to see, right? So I think if you wanted to dig a little bit deeper and, again, through kind of a more formal personality inventory that may tell you things about somebody in terms of how they may fit into the organization, how they may interact with others, leadership style, et cetera, potentially it's going to share information that no matter how many resources I check or references and no matter how much I dig, no matter how much you learn about these candidates through interviews, et cetera, those are things that may not be evident, right? So it's something that when the time comes we'll discuss, and you may want to consider that, but it's going to be a take it or leave it for you.
okay, thanks.
You know, sometimes you do an application and there's like a 25 question. If you go this way, it's a Likert scale.
I hate those things.
Yeah. You pick the wrong word, it tells you a little bit more. I think that's pretty much a psychological assessment to see how you respond to certain
Everything you get
situations.
is, the more data points you get on candidates, I think, the more you know about them,
So I hate those
the better chance you have to get this right. I think fundamentally that's the theory, right?
So we don't have to go that route.
So let me get to the why. Why us? Part of it goes back to what our logo says, developing, deploying, and supporting outstanding leaders. That's what we do. We are a leadership organization. We're all about leaderships. We are all leaders within the organization. We've all been in the role. So we think we're uniquely situated to assist with a process like this, not only at the beginning, when you are looking to fill a position in terms of recruitment, assessment of candidates, et cetera, but even after the fact. We're there to support the new superintendent and you really going forward too in ways that I think other organizations may not be suited for. So in terms of developing, we have a superintendent preparation academy. It's known as the Supts Academy. Through that, it's for aspiring superintendents. We have prepared roughly 800 educational leaders in Michigan for potentially becoming superintendents. Nearly 25% of the current superintendents in Michigan are graduates of that program. The participants, diverse participant group, which we appreciate and encourage. And we do provide executive coaching at all levels too in organizations. I'll give you the example that currently I'm coaching 2 central administrators and 3 building administrators in West Bloomfield. That's something that we commonly do as well. So we help develop leaders in that way too. Deploying. So we recruit and consult with prospective candidates. It's not just a matter of putting the applications out or the postings out. We go out and look to recruit people that we think could be a good fit for you as well. We work with boards and communities to find the best fit, which is obviously very critical. It's not a one-size-fits-all proposition by any means. We lead you through the selection, interview, visitation, and negotiation processes. So this is not something that you do routinely. It is something that we do routinely. We have a tremendous level of experience with this. So we're going to basically hold your hand from the very beginning right through to the end and make sure that this process is as thorough as it needs to be, comprehensive as it needs to be. Make sure that you're following all rules, regulations, policies, et cetera. We'll take good care of you. And we have proprietary documents and procedures that help to ensure that the selection and the appointment is successful. And then in terms of supporting, we do, as part of that fee that we charge, we provide mentoring for the new superintendent for the first year that he or she is in the job. That's not an additional fee, that's just something we do. I've had some superintendents take full advantage of that. We formally set up monthly meetings. I'm at their disposal for phone calls, emails, texts, whatever the case might be. I've had others where they want to keep it more informal. That's okay too. We don't force ourselves on folks, but we're there and we're prepared to help. And as far as who would do that, that would be me as well. If there's interest in continuing that kind of a relationship, we offer executive coaching beyond the first year. But having said that, I will tell you, unless it's a regular thing, I still routinely I take calls and have conversations and problem solve with people in positions that I helped them attain years ago, right? I would never tell somebody, well, your year is up, so you can't ask me that question. Again, if it's going to be a pretty intense kind of a relationship, maybe so. But just know that, again, we support these folks not only in that first year, but beyond. And we do support districts and other public service organizations through some of the things that you see listed here. Provide a lot of services. So in terms of our expertise, again, we're a leadership organization. We conduct ongoing research on the art and science of public leadership, so we stay abreast of current developments. We deliver leadership and governance academies, as we touched on. And again, as I mentioned briefly, we do know the requirements of FOIA, Open Meetings Act. We're going to keep you out of trouble. As I indicated, our entire team collaborates on every search to assist. So that network is pretty broad. And we find that to be immensely helpful, especially, for example, if you're getting applicants from other parts of the state or even out of state who have maybe applied elsewhere. Chances are somebody in our organization is going to know something about those folks. If it's a matter of recruitment, we can reach out. I've helped colleagues before where they've said, I need help on this one. And I've said, well, I've interacted with these folks who I think could be a good fit, might be interested in making a move up north, out west, whatever it might be. So we assist one another that way. Our collective experience, the last time we checked, was more than 130 years of successful superintendent experience. So we built tremendous relationships and contacts across the state. I can't tell you, not only through the work that we do through searches, where we interact with prospective candidates, but also current superintendents, other leaders in districts, retired leaders, through professional organizations, relationships that we know a ton of folks that we can reach out to that really help us with that recruitment. Again, I think in ways that others can't. Back to our guarantee, the search will continue until you have an acceptable candidate, right? Failure is not an option. I made this point earlier about what happens if the appointed person chooses to leave. Should you choose to contract with us for quarterly governance workshops in the first year, we would extend that guarantee to 2 years, where now if that person left for anything other than health reasons within the first 2 years, we would come back and do the search at no additional fee. Some other factors to consider: why us over others? Again, we have experienced and knowledgeable consultants. All of us were successful superintendents. We know the role, we know what it takes, and we think that really is a huge advantage that we have over others. The extensive network, as I mentioned, of outstanding leaders that we have connections with. Our process is thorough, it's inclusive, and it's transparent. I want to go back and touch on the inclusive part again. In terms of stakeholder engagement, we engage them at the beginning when we get their feedback on creating the candidate profile. We engage them when we have them come to public interviews, collect their feedback, and share that with the board for you to consider. We engage them when we go through the second round interviews, and we invite them in to meet with the finalists and ask questions and give you additional feedback. And then again, we have the opportunity for them, even at the end, to provide you feedback that they may have as you're looking to make that final decision. So you're the ones that have to be the decision makers, right? You can't defer to those folks. It's not a popularity contest. It's not a democratic process, but we stress that it's really important that you take into account what you're hearing from your stakeholders. They may provide insights on these folks that things that you didn't pick up on, that you didn't see, and it can be tremendously helpful to you in your decision making, along with all the other data points that you have. We do have a very strong reputation with a long record of great success, which I would encourage you to follow up on and find out for yourself. Why do we do this work? We don't lose sight of the fact that it's all about students. It's about children, right? And fundamentally, when we help great leaders come into districts and do outstanding work, and we help them thrive in those positions, ultimately it's the students who benefit, and that's what's most important. We recognize the value of customer service and commitment. We think that the commitment that you get from us is unparalleled. You would find me to be readily accessible, available by phone, by email, by text. I would be as accommodating as I could possibly be. Communicate quite a bit with you too, so that every step of the way you know exactly what's going on. We do the same even with the candidates too. And since I'm kind of representing you in this search, that reflects well on you too, when we're also taking good care of the candidates and making sure that they're well informed and know what's happening too. So very high level of customer service. We believe that what we do by the assistance we provide, we make the search for you easy, but the decision difficult, meaning that you've got some good candidates to choose from, and it's tough to make that final call. I mentioned the ongoing support well after the search is completed for both your new superintendent and you. High degree of client satisfaction. I'm going to share on the next slide some of the Oakland County districts I've worked with in recent years. I would encourage you to reach out to those folks there. And we're a service organization dedicated to outstanding leadership. That is our business. That's what we do. We're not an organization that comes in and does leadership too or helps with searches. Leadership is what we're all about, right? This is what we do. So I think, again, we're uniquely positioned to do this work. As we say at the bottom there, we strive for perfection and we settle for excellence. So recent Oakland County superintendent searches that we have done, and I have been the lead consultant on all of these, you see here. I would hope you would reach out to folks in these districts, and in the proposal, the written proposal that you received from us too, you see a more comprehensive list in the back, an appendix of numerous districts in recent years that we have supported as an organization. We've highlighted the ones that I have assisted with, so I have helped many districts beyond these, but these are the ones within the county, some of your neighbors, that I have helped recently. I would be very surprised if you reached out to them and didn't hear that they were very satisfied and would likely invite us back the next time they had a need to go through a search. I would hope that's what they'd say. So, it's as quickly as I can go through a lot of information. I hope that you heard what you needed to, but I would certainly welcome any additional questions at this time that you might have.
Thank you, John. Are there any other questions? Trustee Noble?
No questions.
Trustee Coleman?
So in your previous searches in Oakland County, so what do you find as the most difficult part of a search for a like district that you've gone through recently?
That's a great question. I'm going to think about that one. Most difficult part of that for the board?
In finding the right fit, you know, for a like district, and you mentioned some of those, Birmingham's a like district.
Sure.
In terms of finding the right fit based on the profile.
I think the most difficult part is, you know, again, you're going to look at as many data points as you can, but it comes down to you having to exercise judgment. I mean, it's an inexact science, right? There's no guarantee that you can get it exactly right. So to me, that's the most difficult thing, is just, which is why it's so important, and we really stress this, that you trust the process, that it's designed from beginning to end to take you through a process that will put you in the best position in the end to consider all the factors that you need to, and hopefully be in a position again where you've got 2 or 3 really outstanding people to choose from, arguably both of whom or all of whom could potentially be a good fit, but you've got to ultimately make the call and choose which one you think would be the best of the bunch. It's exceedingly difficult. So these days, just getting people in the door and into the applicant pool, it's a little bit more challenging than it used to be. These are tough times for leaders, frankly, right? So recruitment becomes for us that much more important, even more important than it was in the past.
And I guess on that, right, and this is where I'm leading toward, right? So, right, superintendent search is difficult, right? There's, you know, as we're hearing, more and more superintendent positions opening and less people that want to be a superintendent. So what is your, you know, I saw your differentiators, but what is your strategy to try to, when you say recruitment, you know, that's going to be different than the other firms in trying to recruit candidates to come here and be a superintendent and be the right fit?
I'll start with the relationships that we already have. We have relationships and contacts, so that in terms of the pool that's available to us, which includes all of those folks that have gone through our leadership academy. We don't favor them in searches like this, but we have relationships with a lot of folks who we know are aspiring superintendents who've gotten to know us too, and that's a pool of candidates available to us too that others don't have.
Okay, so I see that. So I think you answered my question. So
Okay.
you have people going through your leadership academy that may not be, you know, will be in various stages that maybe other firms may not have, that you could potentially not favor them because they're going through your academy, tap into and on the shoulder and say, you may want to apply for this because of this employee profile, and be a match.
Yes.
Okay, understood.
And I think part of it too, again, is it's the superintendent experience we have. So when we're talking to them about how they could potentially be a good fit here and why this might be an appealing position for them, I'm able to do that from the perspective of somebody who's been in that chair, right, and has done this job and understands the joys of it, understands the rewards of it, but also understands the challenges of it. And look, we don't try to sugarcoat things for people. It's a bad idea, right? You want somebody who wants to be here for all of the great things that you have going as a district and the challenges that you have as a district. You want them to come in with their eyes wide open, know exactly what they might be getting themselves into as best they can, and be the type of person who feels like I'm up to those challenges. I could be a good fit. I could be somebody who could do an outstanding job here. So we do that. I want to make sure that they come in with clear-eyed and understanding exactly what it is that they'd be walking into. And again, I think having the perspective of having been in this role and having dealt with many of those same types of difficulties, challenges, you name it, I think we're in a great position to be able to coach them through that. And part of what I appeal to people on is, somebody needs to be here in this role. No matter how difficult it might be, somebody needs to be here doing this hard work on behalf of students, right? And part of what I would ask myself, for example, is why not me? Why shouldn't that be me? If I have the wherewithal to be able to be in a position like this and do good work on behalf of kids and a community, I should be willing to do that. And so part of it is appealing to kind of that part of folks too, and hoping that they're going to be one of these people. And quite often they're willing to step up, and it kind of gets down to their core. Why did they get into this business in the first place too? So part of it though too is there's a lot to like here, right? This is a very appealing district. You're a very prominent, well-regarded school district you have a lot of positive things going for you. I would say too, one of the advantages that you have is, as of right now, in Southeast Michigan, you're going to have very little to no competition. Sometimes you might go out for a search, and there are several other searches going on in the area, and they may be competing for the interest of people who are aspiring superintendents or looking to make a move. Right now, you'd be about the only game in town, and I think that would be hugely advantageous to you too.
Trustee Kumar, do you have any questions?
So John, you had the list of districts in Oakland County. Over what period of time were all of these searches?
The farthest back any of those goes would be 2020.
Okay.
So all within the last 3 years.
Was that,
The list on the presentation?
On the presentation, the others go back, I want to say 3 to 4 years.
You have any more questions?
No. Thank you.
My question is, so say we do decide that we want to do a national search, what would you say your percentage yield would be for applicants outside of the state? And how many positions have we feel that you have, as Michigan institutions, how many outside people have been placed as superintendents that you've worked with?
That's a great question. I would be hard-pressed to put a number on it. I will tell you the vast majority of the positions filled in the searches that I have done have been candidates, in-state candidates. And I think in most, frankly, we pay attention. I think we all do this. Even people from other firms kind of watch what the other firms are doing and how those searches go, and we pay attention. And I think what you would see, and I've looked, even when you hire a firm that's considered more of a national search firm, fundamentally, when you look at who's in the candidate pools and who the boards are interviewing, they're almost always Michigan candidates. And the candidates who are hired are almost always Michigan candidates, too. So I would tell you this, even without doing the additional advertising out of state, you're likely to attract some interest from out-of-state candidates anyway. As I said before, if there are folks out there who have an interest in coming to Michigan for whatever the reason might be, they're going to be keeping their eyes open. You're a prominent district. They're going to hear about it, and they're going to have the opportunity to apply. If a national publication happens to catch the eye of somebody who might not otherwise be looking, but it may pique their interest, that would be the advantage to that. So organizationally, as far as how many national folks we've hired, we have, but I don't want to be deceitful or dishonest. Again, I know that the vast majority have been in-state candidates, but I think if you looked at the results of other searches from other firms that have conducted searches in Michigan, pretty confident you'd find that it is very similar in terms of the results.
Thank you.
Sure.
Trustee Van Gemmer?
Knowing that you don't make the ultimate decision for any of these districts, do you have any statistics on the retention rate, or, the tenure rate, retention rate for the districts that MLI has facilitated the hiring of?
In our history, we believe the guarantee that we provide, 3 times have we had a kind of honor the guarantee, meaning that it's a very rare occurrence that somebody kind of flames out and leaves the district within the first year. But furthermore, our track record, and I would say even mine personally, in terms of the longevity of the people that have taken the positions, you're right, and I appreciate you recognizing that. I'm the process guy, you're the decision maker, so I'm not the one choosing. So I tell boards sometimes, I won't take credit if you make a great hire, I won't take blame if you make a mistake, right? But fortunately, boards overall have been very happy with the selections they've made, and that's been evident through the longevity of the candidates. Have there been exceptions to that? Sure, but they've been very few and far between.
Trustee Hill?
Thank you. So the fee that you've listed does not include a national component, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And what would the additional fee be for
That's
that?
$1,400, which again, that fee, strictly, that's not a profit for the organization. That strictly covers the additional fees that the organizations we would post with would charge.
Okay, and the additional national search, you indicated there would be advertising. Is there any actual, you going out and trying to find someone? I'm trying to think of the proper terminology, but as opposed to posting it, you actively going out to seek other people, other candidates. Is there any component of that?
We don't go out to other states to look for candidates, but through experience and having been made aware of candidates from out of state who have expressed some interest, our reach goes out that far too, right? Some of what we can do is reach out to other professional organizations too, to be more proactive about it too, to say to the leaders in those organizations in other states, national organizations too, is there anybody that you're aware of or have experience with who this could potentially be a good fit for and who may be in a position where they would be interested in a move to another state? So that's part of how we reach out too, is it's really through other professional organizations who can be very helpful with that. Even when we do this locally within the state of Michigan, quite often, for example, I'll reach out to ISD superintendents locally and have those conversations too. Who do you know who's kind of out there and interested? And you know the district, right? You know some of these folks who could be a great fit for this district.
Another question I have is, you indicated something to the effect of there's a shortage of professionals willing to go into administration or superintendent roles currently. That's kind of the temperament of the...
I don't know if I'd say shortage as much as I would say the fields aren't quite as deep as they used to be.
So on that note, you also said that you didn't think that the competition would be, you don't think there's a lot of people conducting searches right now. We'd be the only sort of game in town looking for someone. The headlines I'm reading indicate otherwise. I think that there's a lot of people there's a lot of turnover at the moment in the state. And so...
In other parts of the state, when I was referring to Southeast Michigan, in this area right now, in terms of who else might be undergoing a superintendent search, there's not much action.
Okay. But do you have any numbers to that effect? Because that's my concern. I'm really focused on this national component because I think that, I don't think that the talent pool is as deep as is ideal. And so I'd really like to focus on that conversation and find out what best practices with other districts are regarding the national component. So I was curious about that comment because my perception is that it's the opposite climate right now in terms of the talent that's out there. I guess my last question is, how often do you source applicants from non-traditional educational backgrounds? meaning someone who doesn't have any prior traditional education or administration experience?
We typically don't recruit that pool of candidates, and part of what we do in terms of how we screen applicants and really consider that too is I'm going to take my cues from you. When you create the candidate profile and we establish qualifications, you're going to be the ones ultimately who decide, are you going to structure that in a way that it's clear that you're going to welcome non-traditional candidates? And I've had conversations with non-traditional folks who have expressed, if there's a district who's looking, I might be interested. Sometimes those postings themselves, the position announcements, clearly indicate that you're looking for an educator, right? Somebody with experience, and that you're not necessarily open to non-traditionals. If you word it in such a way that it's clear that you are going to be open to that, it's going to naturally attract more non-traditional candidates too. You are going to find that no matter what you put in a posting, there are some folks who, if they find this to be an appealing position, they're going to take a shot and they're going to apply anyway. But you're going to be able to steer it a little bit in that way in how we structure the qualifications, the candidate profile, and what's in that position announcement.
Trustee Fowler?
Yeah, thank you. I just had one quick question. Thank you for the presentation.
Sure.
And
In terms of, so obviously people might just apply to this, and I think no matter which firm we would go with, the people that would know that this is this is going to be available, they're going to apply, right?
Sure.
So those ones are going to happen. But
Yep.
as you go through your network and you recruit, do you have any restrictions in terms of like untouchables that you're like, no, this person, any kind of rules in terms of who you might not headhunt per se?
That's a great question. I would be unlikely to, let's say I was involved in a search within the last year, right? And as a result of that search, somebody was newly placed in that position. It'd be very unlikely, in part because I don't know that you'd want that type of candidate anyway, who a year into a job is ready to jump and make a move, right? So I very likely would not be reaching out to candidates like that.
Okay.
Beyond that, there's no rules. And again, it comes down just to fit. It comes down to if I feel like there's a candidate out there, including, and for a district like this one, I will say, different districts, you take a different approach to recruitment. There are some, depending on the size of the district, the status of the district, whatever the case might be, where the pool of candidates I would more naturally be looking at would be more likely central administrators, even principals. For this one, I think this will and should attract sitting superintendents as well. Not limited to that, but I think it will and should. So in terms of recruitment, absolutely. Those would be within the group of people that I'd be looking out to.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Are there any other questions? Okay, well, we want to thank you, John, for your time. We do appreciate you. We'll be in contact either way.
All right, my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your night.
All right, you too. Good luck.
Thank you.